Here's why the Astros will not win the AL West. Time for the AL West season preview.
Baseball is back. The Locked On Podcast Network presents the 2025 MLB season preview, sponsored by FanDuel. All the biggest storylines and breakout stars for all 30 teams. Will the champs repeat, or will another team shock the league? From the experts at the Locked On Podcast Network, it's your team every day.
Welcome to the AL West season preview. We are joined by Locked On A's host Booney, Locked On Rangers host Bryce Paterick, one half of the Locked On Astros podcast Brett Chansey, as well as one half of the Locked On Angels podcast John Fish, and I'm your host from the Locked On Mariners podcast Ty Dane Gonzalez. The 2025 AL West season preview is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Today, these four gentlemen and I will decide which team in the AL West can make a splash or be trash. We'll also talk about the offseason move that changes a team's trajectory. We start, however, with the most important question of all, folks. Who wins the division? The Astros won it last year, of course. Mariners finished in second place, and the Rangers were a fairly distant third. But with everything that happened this offseason, or in the Mariners' case, didn't happen, but we'll get into that later. Feels like all three of these teams are kind of, bunched together. So who do we think overcomes the other two? Or does anyone dare to try and make a case for the A's or the Angels?
Well, it's funny you say that because on the A's point of view, they have a very talented young group of players. They've got no expectations on their ball club whatsoever. And I think they're going to play like they have their hair on fire. And I think they're going to be a little bit more than the pesky A's. I think they're going to probably squeak into the contention for this division early on. And now I don't know if that sustains. But of course, I'm going to take my homerish take that I think that the Astros will win this division this year. But I do think that it is a three-team race, the Astros, the Rangers, and the Mariners. I think the Mariners maybe at the trade deadline get some help, hopefully with their offense because they have a crazy good pitching staff. And the Rangers are looking scary good in the offseason, and I think they're going to be hitting a lot better. And I am reminded daily by Rangers friends of mine that Bruce Bochy wins a title, doesn't win, and then the next year after that wins a title. So I hope that trend doesn't continue. But of course, I've got the Astros edging out the Rangers to win the division. But you know what? That's why we play 162. So I think more than one team has a shot this year. I think the AL West is going to be a really fun divisional race because there's a ton of storylines. And the Angels, don't forget about the Angels. They've got some really cool storylines. You say Kikuchi. I would like to see what he does this next year. Hopefully for them, he can replicate what he did with the Astros in the second half.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, sorry, Bryce. I was just going to say with the Angels, they did that thing that they did 2 years ago where they had kind of a good season until everything fell apart, which is, classic Angels season. But it was Trout got hurt, Rendon got hurt, and the typical storylines. But it was a lot of moves that year, like bringing in Gio Urshela that aren't going to light up the world, but are the kinds of guys you need on the team. And so for this year, bringing in Kikuchi and Hendricks, having Yohan Moncada over at third base, kind of just having some subtle moves that aren't going to light the world up. But at the same time, I think that keeps you from going from Zach Neto to some guy who's only had 32 major league plate appearances playing shortstop for you. So I think that they'll have a better season certainly than last year. Really counting on Trout to be healthy. He's slimmed down. He's not as bulky and muscular as he used to be. And so I think that's going to help him stay on the field, and that move to right field, I think, is going to help him as well.
Yeah, I think this AL West is going to go from one of the worst divisions in baseball last year to one of the better ones. Probably not the best, but at least much, much better than they were last year. We were all thinking at the beginning of last year it was going to be another, three-team race like it was in 2023 of Rangers and Mariners and Astros. And then it just looked like, okay, well, it's just the Mariners division. And then they, really tripped over themselves down the stretch, and the Astros really
Thanks for the reminder of that.
caught fire. I figured you might have forgotten. I figured you could use it. Hey, my team was boring and bad down the stretch, and I don't know if I'd take boring and bad versus tripping over your feet and coughing up that division lead. But I mean, the Rangers are going to be so much better this year. I mean, I think whether the Bruce Bochy every other year title trend continues, I don't think the trend of the Astros being tops in the AOS is going to continue. I mean, the Mariners may not have done anything in the offseason, but their pitching staff is just too good. And having a full year of Randy Rosarena, having a better year from probably the best player in this division in Julio Rodriguez, coming off of a couple of, inconsistent seasons, but still he's just so talented. And if they hit really at all, I think they're going to be really, really good this year. The Astros just lost too much. They just didn't replace enough. And Jose Altuve is getting older. So much of this pitching staff is getting older. They got rid of Kyle Tucker, who was just incredible. And the pieces they got back are fine. Maybe for the long term, Cam Smith looks like a really bright future player, but Altuve is getting old. I mean, their best hitter, Jordan Alvarez, has trouble staying on the field, and the Rangers, they just keep getting better. I mean, another step forward from Wyatt Langford, having a healthier season from the offense, having Jacob deGrom pitching for a full season, in case people kind of forgot who that guy is. Plus, with Rocker and Leiter coming up, Jack Leiter and Kamar Rocker, two of the Rangers' top pitching prospects. I mean, this Rangers team is most definitely slated to make a big jump this season. And the bullpen, while they had two good relievers last year, have a more solid, more deep bullpen. It might not be as flashy as a Kirby Yates with a 1.17 ERA, but I think this Rangers team is most definitely poised to win the AOS. And even if they don't, well, we see in October that doesn't really matter all that much, does it?
My take is going to be a little bit of controversial and a little bit of surprising to a lot of listeners, and you'll understand why after I say it, but give me a minute here. I think and I'm not saying this just because a host of the A's or a homer take. I think the A's are going to win the West, and not only win the West, I think they're going to run away with it. And let me tell you why. Last year, the big optimism with regard to the A's coming into this year was a 500 record in the second half. Well, it's actually a lot better if you really look at it. They had an awful September with a lot of September call-ups. July and August, they were 29-22 and literally gave away 3 games, 2 to Anaheim and 1 to Cincinnati. I mean, gave them away. I mean, I'm sure everybody has that story. Point being, at the 29-22 record, I believe they had the 5th best record in the American League. And if you count what was supposed to happen, if call-ups here and call-ups there, I mean, you're looking at one of the best records in all of American League. We're better this year. If you look and stop considering the A's ownership and the move and playing in a minor league ballpark, player for player down the line, we are extremely, extremely talented. Obviously, like everybody else, we have to stay healthy and pitching has to hold up. I mean, I think that's everybody's story. I agree with all you guys. I think the West is going to be so fun. You're looking at Seattle as, I don't think there's much of an argument here, is probably the best pitching staff in all of baseball. When you're looking at Texas, Eovaldi and DeGrom, speak for themselves, and that lineup is ridiculous. The Astros are the Astros. And the Angels are young and they're up and coming, and Mike Trout's still there. So they are off the charts. I think it's going to be a fun division, but if you really, really look at the A's roster, lineup, pitching staff, bullpen. Don't forget the bullpen. Last year, it was ranked one of the best in baseball. We're better this year. I love the Leclerc pickup. I love Miller in the 9th. It's almost going to be a 7-inning game for as I consider. I think everyone's sleeping on the A's, and they're saying, hey, they're going to be better. They're going to be improved. No, I think we're going to be a lot better than what you think. I would compare it to, and I'm not saying it's going to be this, but something similar when the Giants won 107 games a few years ago. I'm not saying the A's are going to win that many, but how that came at a big surprise and out of nowhere. The A's are going to be that good. We'll see what happens. We have to stay healthy. Everybody has a story.
Yeah. So I think, It really comes down to the three teams for me right now. I do think that the A's are going to be better, more improved. I wouldn't be surprised if they are an 80+ win team this year, especially playing in that ballpark. Anything can go, right? We'll see kind of just how the games go in general. All 81 of them at that ballpark this year, and just kind of the weirdness and the wackiness that can come with that. But I think in general, like all five of these teams are really going to beat up on each other. And I just don't see a clear 90 win team in this division anywhere. Now, if you told me like, oh, the Astros are going to win 93 games and win the division, or the Mariners are going to win 95 games and win the division, fine. I totally I could see that. Sure. Right. I think the Rangers, the Astros, and the Mariners are all talented enough to do that. But I think that they're going to beat up on each other so much. And the Angels and the A's are also going to be incredibly pesky. I mean, last year, the Mariners lost 6 games in a row to the Angels. And had they won maybe 2 of those, it's probably a whole different conversation about the Mariners season.
They went 8-5 against the Mariners, by the way. 8-5.
Yeah,
just want to put that out there.
I'm fully aware. I'm fully aware of that. Yeah. So, and if had they won, a couple of extra of those games, and if, Willie Calhoun didn't exist, then, hey, maybe the Mariners are in the playoffs.
Shout out to former Ranger great Willie Calhoun.
Don't worry. He's not on the Angels this year. Ty, don't worry about it.
Who, for some reason, no one's picked that guy up this year, as far as I'm aware.
He's playing in Mexico, I'm pretty sure.
I still have a sleeve in one of my baseball card binders full of Willie Calhouns that at one point were worth quite a bit.
So I'm gonna take the Rangers in the division. I think they had the best off season. I think they have one of the better off seasons of any team in baseball this year, which honestly says a lot more about the state of the game than what the Rangers did. But I think the Rangers did have a really nice offseason and added some really nice complementary pieces, like the Lau or the Lowe. Sorry, I always get Brandon Lau and Nathaniel Lowe mixed up. But I like the Lowe for Garcia deal, and then essentially replenishing Lowe's role with like Berger and Jock Peterson. I think that was a really savvy move, and I think they are the most balanced team in the West right now. But again, I could see it being any of these 3 teams. I could see any of them exploding, but I also kind of feel like it's just going to come down to whoever gets to 87, 88 wins. So on that note, let's get into the over-under win totals for the AL West from our friends over at FanDuel. So they have the Astros at 86.5, Rangers at 85.5, as well as the Mariners at 85.5, the Angels at 72.5, and the A's at 71.5. We're all obviously an optimistic bunch about our teams, but is there anyone here who thinks their team might hit the under?
I don't think our guys hit the under. I think our bullpen and I think our starting staff is being very undervalued and underappreciated across baseball, especially with who we have coming back. Fromber, Hunter Brown, Spencer Arrighetti is going to be a top 10 in Ks per 9 this year easily. And I think with what we got back with Walker also signing in Paredes, I just think we replaced 60 potential home runs with 22 home runs. And I think Cam Smith makes a vie for Rookie of the Year if he gets either makes opening day roster or gets a call up. The kid's that good. So I don't see an under for my guys unless, look, would we like, what we're like a year or two removed where we had like 6 guys on the IL in our pitching staff, right? So if the injury bug hits, I can see the Astros going under that. I honestly think they win between 91 and 93 games, but I don't know. What was the A's total?
71.5.
Oh, wow. They're going to be way over that. They're going to be way over 71.5. I feel pretty confident about that.
Yeah. Well, me too.
I feel like everybody in this division besides the Astros are going to hit the over, but that might just be my own personal biases.
We'll get into this a little later on in the show. But yeah, you could tell me like the Mariners win 77 games this year and I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. You tell me they won 95 games this year, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. So it's possible they could hit the under. I wouldn't be shocked by it. This team just doesn't have the depth to withstand significant injuries. So if that happens, then yeah, we could easily see them hit the under, even with how great this pitching staff is. But fingers crossed that they hit the over.
I mean, with regard to the A's, I mean, the whole thing with the A's, you're looking at guys that haven't been real stars yet, right? Lawrence Butler had a humongous second half last year. Brent Rooker had a great year 2 years ago, but really broke out last year. In order for the A's to be successful, the stars are going to have to be stars, and they have not really established themselves as those type of players yet, right? So we're still hoping what we think they are going to be, but there's not enough of a sample size of that. I mean, for example, Rooker's hitting under 200 in spring training. He hasn't been great whatsoever. We have a prospect in Soderstrom is at 150. Again, it's spring training, but when you're looking at players that you think who they can be with a small sample size, it's always a little scary. So with that being said, yeah, I think the A's are going to be really good, but that's based on stars being stars, and they got to be the players they were last year. Is Rooker a 40 home run guy hitting 290, or is he a 240 guy hitting 22 bombs? So,
I think there's a kind of piggybacking off Booney's point and speaking to the Angels, there's just there's a lot of unproven track records there, right? Like Zach Neto, 5 WAR player, Baseball Reference WAR player last year. That was his first full season in the bigs. And then Logan O'Hoppe had a great start to the season, and then toward the end just got really worn out behind the dish and was exhausted by the end of the season. So there's a lot of guys that you're like, those are good players, but they've just yet to prove who they can be. So I'm hoping that with these guys having a year of baseball behind them, that their floor has been established and that they can rise above that floor. And again, coming into the season with this team, it's a matter of how you finish, not really how you start. And for these guys to start with the team that they have, I think the expectations of their win total makes sense. But I'm going to take the over because I think that a lot of those young guys take a step forward now that they have a year of baseball behind them and really step up and prove something and have some veteran presences around them. Travis d'Arnaud, Jorge Soler, hopefully Mike Trout stays on the field. I think that's going to be really beneficial to the offense. And then as far as guys like Kikuchi and Hendricks really helping along the young guys like Jose Soriano and probably Reed Detmers or Jack Ohanowitz, I think that the veteran presence mixed with the potential of the young guys, I think is going to help the Angels at least be 500. I think that would be a really good step in the right direction for them.
Yeah.
All right. Coming up, the offseason move that, go ahead.
I was just gonna say something real quick about, I really like what the A's and Angels have done. Why I think they're gonna be much better is because they added more of that depth with the Angels. They always, took those big swings for the stars in the offseason, like a Josh Hamilton signing, like way back in the day, like a Rendon signing to try and get just that one big guy. But I feel like they've done really well of just raising that floor, of having more complementary pieces. Same with the A's of just adding more talent. I just don't think there's enough depth on either of those teams to compete just yet, but they're not a bottom of baseball team, either of those teams. They're going to be a solid team.
All right, well, coming up, the offseason move that changed the team's trajectory for 2025. It's the AL West season preview. There's nothing like the energy of an MLS match, the chants, the atmosphere, the last-minute goals. If you want to experience it all live, Gametime makes getting tickets easier than ever. With last-minute deals, all-in pricing, and a lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLS tickets. Plus, ticket prices actually drop as kickoff gets closer, so you can score amazing seats at a great price. I love that I can see the exact view from my seat before I buy, so there's no surprises when I get to the stadium. Gametime also has event cancellation protection and even job loss assurance, so I can buy with confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. This is the AOS season preview. So fellas, Shohei Ohtani left the division last year. Now Kyle Tucker has left. So who does that leave as the best player in the AL West? Is it Yordan Alvarez, Corey Seager, Julio despite the down year, Lawrence Butler after the breakout year? Or is there still an argument to be made for Mike Trout?
Well, I think you have to automatically go to Yordan Alvarez as one of the top 3 or 4 left-handed hitters in the league. I think one of the top 5 hitters in the league. And I would find anyone having a hard case to make against that. Yordan Alvarez, the lone lefty on this starting roster. I like Yordan Alvarez, but it's definitely no disrespect to Trout or Julio Rodriguez or Corey Seager. Those are, I mean, we've got some, and Butler, we've got great stars on each of the teams, but I'm thinking Yordan would be top guy in our division just because of what he's done so far to this point in his career.
I think it's got to be Seager. I think it's just got to be Seager. I mean, Yordan might be a little bit better of a hitter than Seager, but he's a legitimately good shortstop while also being a top 5. If you're a hater, a top 10, no worse than top 10 hitter in baseball. He plays a legitimately good shortstop. He hits lefties, he hits righties, he hits fastballs, breaking balls, any kind of pitch, any location. He is just too good. And the only reason I might find an argument against that is only because Wyatt Langford is up and coming. And by the end of this year, I feel like he's going to catapult himself into that conversation. But Corey Seager, 2-time World Series MVP, he's just too good to not be the best player in this division. And I think it's not particularly close, unless Mike Trout is actually fully healthy.
That's the big question too. Is Mike Trout going to be healthy? You mentioned it earlier. He was just a big bulky guy. And I think him trimming down the season is going to be easier on the knees, the legs, all the stuff that's plagued him over the last couple of years. And that's the thing. It's not a consistent injury. It's like, oh, the meniscus. And then the other last year it was the hamate bone in his hand. So just a bunch of freak injuries. So I hope that with him trimming down, he's going to get back to being Mike Trout. He might not be the, home run hitter that he was when he was swole, but I think if he looks more like he did, in those mid 2010s, and he's lean and mean and he's able to stay on the field and play healthy, if Mike Trout gets a full season, I think he's in the MVP conversation.
I think top 3, if you're looking at the players, I think it's Mike Trout until it's not Mike Trout. And then Corey Seager, I got Lawrence Butler, and then Yordan Alvarez, absolutely. Everyone's forgetting about Altuve. The guy just keeps doing it and doing it and doing it. So if I was to pick 5 players, those would be it.
But could you really put Lawrence Butler over Yordan Alvarez?
I did.
Oh.
I did.
Okay.
As far as hitting wise, I mean, if you're going to look both sides of both sides, Yordan Alvarez absolutely is one of the best hitters in all of baseball. But him just being, that's why I don't have Rooker there either. Him being just designated to that DH spot is the reason why.
I think Julio could absolutely be the best player in the division. He just hasn't proven that he can be yet, right? Or that he is yet, rather. The last 2 seasons for Julio have been a story of 2 very extreme ends of the spectrum. Where last year, for example, for the first couple of months, he was just objectively bad. Not for his standard, just in general, he was just bad. He had like 7 extra base hits in the first 2 months of the season or something like that. That's not the guy that Julio needs to be. But like what happened in August of 2023, Julio exploded at one point in the season, and the overall numbers looked pretty solid at the end of the day. He was a 4-win player. Like, that's a really good year for most players. But we know that Julio can be significantly better than that. We know with all that talent that Julio has, he's an elite center field defender. He's a guy that can easily be a 30-30 or more player, that he can be an 8, 9, 10 win player and be an MVP candidate at any given moment. We just haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen the consistency yet. That's what I'm hoping to see this year. And if there is more consistency from Julio, then I think the answer is pretty clear here, who the best player is in the ALS, just from an overall standpoint, across the board, 5 tools. But until he can prove that he can do that, I just don't feel confident, even as a Mariners fan, to say that he is the best player in the ALS. He has the most potential, I would say. That's how I would put it. So right now, I think my pick would be Corey Seager or Yordan, because I fear Yordan Alvarez. But all right, so let's talk about the best and worst offseason moves in the division. And the answer to me is pretty simple as far as the worst goes. It was Mariners ownership deciding to give its front office just $16 million to spend this winter instead of, crazy idea supporting the deepest rotation in baseball. But this is my therapy session. So any others come to mind, or who do you think had the best move this offseason?
we talking best move or moves in general? Because best move, I would say just bringing back Nathan Eovaldi was just such an important part for this Rangers team. I mean, they needed more depth in the rotation. They needed both depth and top-end talent, a guy who could start in those big games, start in those postseason games. And Eovaldi has got that pedigree up there with literally anybody in baseball, and just the overall complement of those moves of making 5 different bullpen signings and bringing guys that are all going to raise the floor of this bullpen, signing a Jock Peterson, exactly the bat this team needed to just revitalize that offense, making that trade out, shipping out Nathaniel Lowe, who I loved, World Series champion, but fortifying that bullpen, and then bringing in Jake Berger for just a couple of mid-tier prospects. I think the Rangers overall had the best offseason, and I think that the Mariners definitely had the quietest offseason. And if I were a Mariners fan, I'd be so mad at them not spending any money to supplement this offense, this help supplement this pitching staff with some offense. And I would just be furious at wasting a staff.
Oh, don't worry. There is a lot of furious people in the Mariners fan base.
Okay, good. I was worried.
Myself included. Yeah.
You don't see the dartboard of the owner behind Jeff. I'm behind Ty.
Keep an eye on Jeffrey Springs from the A's. That was my most surprising, that's going to be my dark horse off-season pickup. We picked him up in a trade just a couple of years ago. He's one of the best left-handers in all of baseball. Tommy John surgery obviously sidelined him. He's back, first spring training in a few years. So obviously the A's had to spend to get to a certain point to avoid a grievance, but Jeffrey Springs, keep an eye out for him. I think he's going to be a big dark horse.
Can I say that I think some of the most significant moves that the Angels did are the moves of the guys they got rid of? They traded Griffin Canning away and got Jorge Soler. They let Patrick Sandoval walk. Guys, they had 90 starts from guys on the mound that you didn't know what you were going to get. And that includes Patrick Sandoval and Griffin Canning. You didn't know what they were going to do when they went out there. So to fortify the rotation with some veteran experience, I think is going to help them play a whole lot better this season. I personally really like the addition of Kenley Jansen, if he can teach Ben Joyce that cutter and make him an elite closer for the rest of his career.
Well, I think the Astros made a lot of under the radar moves, like Stephen O'Kurt. We got some guys that we got last year, and Caleb Ort. And I think we've got some sneaky good bullpen pieces out of that. And having the guts to trade Kyle Tucker in his walk year, which we have never done. We just let the guys walk. Correa, Springer, Cole. I mean, just name the list of all the former guys that have been a part of championship teams and are no longer here. And Bregman, he walks, we get nothing for him, right? So we get back Paredes, we get back Wisniewski, who looks like he's going to slot in as a number 5, who I think the Cubs horribly underutilized as a relief pitcher. I think he's going to be a solid pickup. And your number 5 doesn't have to be a 20-game winner. I think Wisniewski fits that. And then again, Cam Smith. I mean, I can't sing this kid's praises enough. Or it's like, well, he's been doing it against AA guys. Well, today he had an opposite field home run off of McGee, who is there for is it McGee or McGill off the Mets, who's a legit big league, he's a legit big league pitcher. And so what the Astros did in the offseason, I think, was a lot more significant than Astros fans thought. And I think for the first time we get something back, 3 guys, 12 to 14 years service time versus 1 year of service time. I think that's a pretty good deal.
All right, coming up, what team could make a splash or be trash? It's the 2025 AL West season preview. All right, folks, it's that time of year again. March Madness is finally here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. That's FanDuel.com.
I think I would say Julio Rodriguez. Julio Rodriguez has the most pressure on him. Coming back, coming off that last year he had being looked at as such the phenom he is, I think he has a lot of pressure to come back big for the Mariners, considering the big criticism on the Mariners this year is their offense. So I think a lot of pressure is on him. Biggest splash, obviously, I'm going to stick with the A's. I got them winning the West. I've said that for a while. We'll see what happens.
I think for the team with the most pressure on it, it's also got to be the Mariners. I mean, the Astros, they've won a World Series in this championship window. Their window might be on the close, or, it's the Astros. They always find a way to keep it open. The Rangers, they've won a championship. The Mariners haven't even made the World Series yet, and they have such an incredibly talented team and a young team. And, these windows only stay open for so long. And I don't know how much longer the Mariners are going to be able to keep that window open. It should be a while with that pitching staff and the just development apparatus. But I think there's a lot of pressure on the Mariners to win and win right now.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Bryce on the Mariners. Ty, I'm a generational Mariner hater. You're a generational Angel hater. But I can agree that the Mariners have one of, if not the best rotation in baseball, at least the AL West. And to see that they have this rotation and not the offense to go along with it, I think that there's a lot of pressure on them to do something with it. And again, as a baseball fan, I can admire what the Mariners have, but you guys got to do something with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think team wise, that would be, where I rest. Because, but if Julio Rodriguez can have a revitalization of his career, and you can have this offense, like you said, do the things they need to do, Cal Riley, those guys, then you've got a really, really good chance of doing some things and making some noise to where, look, if you guys sit where you are and nobody really expects y'all to win it, maybe that puts less pressure on you. But I know for the fan base, they're like, okay, guys, when is the time? It's now. And just one correction, Bryce said we won a title in this championship run. We've actually won 2 titles. So just want.
I'm just talking about ones that count.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Yeah. Kind of walked right into that one.
I know. I
saw where that was coming from. So yeah, I mean, this is kind of the Mariners topic, right? It's very clearly them, because we've already seen what their spending habits are. Mariners ownership has made their stance very clear on what they're willing to spend and what they're not willing to spend, and who they're willing to spend it on and who they're not willing to spend it on. And this rotation is starting to get older and more expensive. Logan Gilbert's going to be ARB 3 this winter. He'll only have 2 years left of club control at the end of this season. George Kirby will have 3. Julio is now making the peak of what he's going to make over the course of his contract. Cal Raleigh is going to get more expensive. They'll have 1 year left of Randy Arozarena if he doesn't get traded before season's end. This is kind of the window. Now, they do have an influx of talent coming up, specifically on the offensive end of things here over the next year or two. But are they actually going to be able to kind of bridge that gap between this contention window and the next one, especially if they're not willing to spend? And so this year, it's a big year for just getting back on the horse, right? Like being able to actually get back into the playoffs and and see what this rotation can do in the postseason. Because I mean, pitching is the great equalizer in October. And if the Mariners get to October, even last year with how bad they were and how mediocre and just frustrating they were to watch last year, if they had just snuck in, you felt pretty good about their odds, just giving who was going to take the ball on a night-to-night basis. So really all this comes down to is just giving that rotation a chance to pitch in October. And hopefully they're able to do something at the deadline to help this offense out, which, look, if Julio, and I would say Julio has the most pressure on him as a player from this standpoint as well. If Julio can be that guy that he absolutely can be, which is, a 7, 8, 9 win player, an MVP candidate, then that can help mask some of the deficiencies on this roster. It makes getting production out of third base or second base a lot less important. But if he's a 4 to 5 win guy again, then you need Jorge Polanco to produce. You need Ryan Bliss or Cole Young or Dylan Moore or just someone to produce at second base. There's just so many question marks that can be easily answered with a couple of solutions, but there are quite a few ways this could quickly go sideways for them as well. And if they don't make the postseason again, this probably means more firings. Scott Service got fired last year. This might mean that Jerry Dipoto is out. Justin Hollander is out in the front office, which would honestly make a lot of Mariners fans happy. But knowing this ownership group, can they actually find someone better to replace those guys? Who knows? So, especially with the reputation that ownership has built for themselves, how many GMs want to sign up for that? So, let's talk splash or trash. Which of these teams could you see winning, for example, 85 plus games or losing 85 plus games? And you go, yeah, that makes sense.
85 plus. That means
I'd say the A's, just because anybody's 1 or 2 injuries away from, being really bad. The A's, I think if things break right, they could be fantastic. I think 85 wins for me is probably their ceiling, just with the guys that they're dealing with. The rotation is well upgraded. I love the Leclerc move for them. Shout out Jose Leclerc going on an absolute heater in 2023. Shows you how random the postseason can be at times. And their lineup is good. I just don't think it's quite deep enough to win, in that 90 win kind of range. And if they have an injury to like a Lawrence Butler or to, say a Brent Rooker, or if, they can't get a whole lot out of Jeffrey Springs, which I think in terms of innings wise is entirely possible with him coming off of that injury. I think it's possible they have like the widest range of outcomes of anybody in this division, because I don't see a scenario where the Astros or the Rangers or the Mariners lose 85 games. And I see a pretty likely scenario where each of those teams could win 85 plus games.
Yeah, I think so too. Just for the A's, is that, they are young. They did bring in Severino. They did bring in Springs. They do have a veteran presence. They're not, they didn't just show up, but at the same time, when you do have teams that are chock full of veterans through the long haul, that's where I think you get on the, the side where the A's could trip up, not because they're not talented, not because they don't play well, but just that lack of experience, maybe that lack of depth. But that does seem to be, the widest range. Maybe the Angels too, because, the Angels have, underperformed. They will go through a 3 or 4 week stretch where they're just beating everybody and then they just disappear. And maybe with Mike Trout losing the weight, staying healthy all season, maybe that's the charge they need. This guy's stayed through this team through thick and thin, and he takes a lot of crap on the chin for it. Why don't you go somewhere else? Why don't you play somewhere else? Why don't you go play Bryce Harper? He stayed. He's the statue at the end of his career outside that stadium. So if anybody can bring a team together, Mike Trout, this would be a good year, and that could be a wide range on the upside for the Angels if they are to do something positive.
Yeah, I think they have the widest range, upwards and downwards. It's funny, they didn't play the AL West until May, and it was against the Rangers, and that was after Mike Trout was already injured. And in the first half, they went 500 against the West with that version of the team, 2024, which wasn't very good. And then they absolutely fell off in the second half. But that was after selling at the deadline and losing guys to injuries and replacing them with below average players. So I think the way that they're starting this season, I think is going to bode well for them. But again, the range of outcomes depends on where are they at by the trade deadline. Are they going to sell? And will their second half be a tankathon like it was last year, where they ended up losing 99 games because all of their talented guys were off the team and traded away? I think the way that they start this year is going to speak really well to how they sustain themselves throughout the rest of the season. Again, that range of outcomes, I think it could be, 80, somewhere in the 80 win total and somewhere down in the 60 win total for the Angels this season.
I'm concerned about the darn Mariners, man. With that pitching staff from top to bottom, it is just name after name and just filthy stuff night after night. And unfortunately, we open up against them with a 4-game set in Seattle and we got to face that staff. So it's just, that's all I think, is that there's no weaknesses with regard to that staff. And I think the hitting's going to come around. I think Seattle has the potential to have a huge year, and I think they're built to win again if the hitting comes around, which I think it will.
I think this Mariners team could win 90 plus games again, like I said earlier. And if you told me that, I go, yeah, that makes sense. That rotation, Julio figures it out, is more consistent this year. Maybe you actually get some production out of Mitch Garver, Jorge Polanco, etc. Yeah, totally. Like if they won 95 plus games, I'm like, totally get it. And they made some trades at the deadline. Yeah, absolutely. If you told me, yeah, they won 80 and they missed the playoffs and people are getting fired, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense too. So yeah, I know this has been very Mariners centric, this segment, but like, I think they're kind of the ideal answer for a lot of these questions that we're asking today, just because of the position that they've ultimately put themselves in. So it's unfortunate, but also the talent level on that roster is immense. They're such a weird team to cover. I got to tell you, as someone that talks about this team on a daily basis, very, very weird team to cover.
Hey, lots of content, lots of ideas, lots of things to talk about for sure.
Except for player acquisitions this winter, Bryce.
Yeah, well, theoretical player acquisitions, I mean, off the charts.
For real, those Fan Fiction Friday episodes going crazy.
You did it. No, yeah, that was great. I was like, I love that. And just let you know, Ty, like I like the ideas y'all come up with the fan interaction stuff. We got a little fan hot takes thing coming up. This next week, hopefully we get some videos in. But yeah, no.
You guys got fans?
Oh
yes,
no,
we do. We have fans.
Jesus.
They're about 36 inches high, and they're sponsored by Wheat Canada.
Unbelievable. That's not
well, all right, guys. Want to thank you all for doing this with us, and thank you for watching. That's going to do it for us. For all the division previews for the 2025 MLB season preview, subscribe to Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And for more on the Mariners, Rangers, Astros, Angels, and A's, subscribe to Locked On Mariners, Locked On Rangers, Locked On Astros, Locked On Angels, and Locked On A's on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.